This episode features Maryland Public High School students talking about their personal experiences and thoughts about lockdown drills. Students were provided the initial questions in advance to prepare for their response. Their responses are authentic and in their own voice. Students were not prompted to give any specific answer in response to the questions. MCSS encourages school personnel to not overlook the student perspective when making school safety decisions. Welcome to our first student voice panel for lockdown drills, this topic series. We're pretty excited to be joined by some students to share their experiences and offer some suggestions for lockdown drills. So we're going to begin by asking each of them to introduce themselves and to share a thought and or experience that they have had related to lockdown drills. And to start us off, Gavin, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Hey everybody, my name's Gavin. I am a junior in Howard County, and one experience I like to know is actually from my 8th grade year of middle school. And in that, we had a lockdown because of a shooter threat in the area. And just remember the fear I had, definitely not knowing, and the lack of communication only adding to that.
Thank you for that, Gavin, sharing that experience. I'm going to pass it to Ariella.
Hi, my name is Ariella, and I'm a senior from Washington County. When I went to school in Frederick County, we would have threats like multiple times during the school year, which is unfortunate, but at the same time, it's given me a lot of experience surrounding lockdown drills, which can also be helpful in a way.
Thank you, Ariel. Look forward to hearing more of some of those experiences and what you've learned. And next we have Aisha. Aisha, if you could introduce yourself and share a thought or two.
Hello, I am Aisha, a junior in Prince George's County. And in terms of lockdown drills, since elementary school, I've had a lot of practice with it. And overall, seeing the impact it has on my society and my school, it helped build my confidence in case anything happens.
Great. I really appreciate you all joining us here today. And it's been, I think, ideal that we have sort of a cross section of locations across the state represented in this conversation. So I'd like to start with having you all share with us one thing that you think makes lockdown drills effective, preparing students for responding best during a real emergency. Ariella, if you could get us started.
I would say something that definitely helps is the consistency of lockdown drills. For me, I've been doing the same drills every quarter, so 4 times this school year since kindergarten. So by the time I graduate, I'll have done the same drills 52 times. And I think it really helps that not only are we doing them frequently, but the drills never change. So it kind of prevents confusion between drills like switching up or something like that. So I think it kind of builds a muscle memory. And so if we had to encounter an unfortunate but real threat, I think we would know what to do because we practiced so many times.
That's a really great response. Thank you for really thinking about that. And imagine, I think, are you a senior this year, Ariella?
Yeah.
Right? So that requires us to do some math, right? 4 times a year for 13 years is a lot that you've engaged in those practices. So consistency, very important. Gavin, what would be one thing that you think makes lockdown drills effective?
So first, I want to echo what Ariella said. I completely agree with the consistency. But something I would like to add is having lockdown drills be more thorough in nature. For example, in my county, we a lot of times only do modified lockdown drills in practice. And that means we just lock the door, turn off lights, and we still practice class. We don't go through the actual motions of what will we do? What's the best way to exit? What will we do in this event? Will we hide behind the door? Will we hide behind the closet? We don't know. And I think actually exemplifying that, and even though that may not be the most pleasant experience, practicing hiding behind and maybe even lifting up the tables, becoming more familiar with the entire process versus just locking the doors would get students more prepared. God forbid that happens.
Yeah, and Gavin, so I'm going to let Aisha go, but I want to come back to that too before we move on to our other question a little bit and ask some kind of follow up questions related to this modified lockdown drill. So Aisha, could you share with our listening audience what would be one thing that you believe makes lockdown drills most effective?
Yes. So, one thing I believe that makes lockdown drills most effective is identifying key weaknesses, especially in the structure of that school. So, like Gavin said, yes, you can lock the door or go into a corner. But if a school can't identify proper weaknesses, such as doors that may not lock or areas where communication may not be viable, that is important, especially in, God forbid, an emergency. It is important that so that the school can clearly identify areas that they need to improve.
Mm. So actually, Aisha, before I go back to Gavin a little bit, I'm curious. So yourself, and then perhaps others, have you ever, as students, been asked to provide feedback like that? So perhaps being in a classroom that a door doesn't lock, is there a method for students to be able to share concerns, information about like a lockdown drill that may have occurred? Um, and a weakness was identified.
So, no. Even at my old school, sometimes there was certain doors that students cannot like really lock in case of an emergency. And there was also previous times where an emergency did happen. And sometimes like that was a certain weaknesses that students didn't know. And that is what caused insecurity and fear during a drill. So I think through this podcast, I think I find it really special that we are talking about this as a problem and as an issue that can be occurring.
Yeah, I mean, well, our next question, we'll talk a little bit about that sort of emotional and mental safety in a drill, but I can imagine that that would create some anxiety, right? Knowing the importance of a locked door and having a classroom door that's not able to lock. So I appreciate you for sharing that, Aisha. Gavin, I want to come back to the modified lockdown concept. So it sounds like that's something that you've experienced a little bit of. Why do you think that that's a method that has been utilized? And then beyond like why maybe folks are doing it that way, is it beneficial in terms of decreasing anxiety or making people feel safe? I guess thoughts on that.
All right, thank you so much for the question. And just to have a little bit on the previous question you asked Aisha, I completely agree with what she said in that the opportunity's never been provided. I feel like the one time or the few times actually now I have given input, I've kind of had to force myself in those spaces or push to be heard, which is something that I think shouldn't be in the case in a sense, and they should openly seek student input, being the ones most directly impacted. But going back to the question about modified lockdown, I think the reason, at least from my perspective, being a student, is to not interfere with class time. And of course, not going through the process is a lot more easy. You just lock the door. And some teachers didn't like, some teachers don't. So those are the main two reasons, at least from what I've had an experience with my county and what teachers have told me that they do that. But I do feel it may not be as realizing for students to be like, "Oh, lockdown, it makes you feel more relaxed." But sometimes I think going through the proper drills and format is crucial. And while it may be uncomfortable, like actually hiding under a desk, for example, in the earthquake lock drills or in a shooter drill, actually knowing where in the room that you hide if you go behind the door. Because in my high school as well, at my 10th grade year, we had an event where we didn't know what was happening. A teacher ended up getting knocked out, and I was behind the door with scissors ready to stab if I have to. It was petrifying. And just because of lack of not knowing what to do, not knowing to barricade the door, we didn't know anything.
All right. Thank you for that. I hadn't really thought of the not wanting to lose instruction time, right? Making it quick, as quick as possible is one reason for that. So I appreciate you thinking through that. Yeah. So thank you for thinking about kind of those things that make lockdown drills effective in being prepared for that emergency. I want you now to pivot to thinking about and sharing one thing that makes a lockdown drill safe. So when we say safe here, I want you to think kind of mentally and emotionally safe. So the way the lockdown drill maybe is conducted that makes people feel emotionally safe. And I'm going to start with Aisha this time.
Thank you. So, because lockdown drills are announced in practice in a sort of structured and calm way, it creates a sort of mental and emotional safety net because it helps reduce the feeling of fear and imagining like the worst case scenario. So, because of this like predictability and the structured way, students are now able to learn like step by step what to do in case something happens. They won't be scared, they won't be fearful, and they won't be like losing and lacking confidence. So, because lockdown drills are structured, it creates a mental and emotional um, safety net. Yes. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that, right? So the importance of that advanced announcement. So again, the communication, sharing with students and staff that this is a drill, right? That you are practicing those procedures is what makes that element safely or safety. All right, I will move to Ariella. Ariella, thoughts on what makes a drill emotionally safe for students?
Yeah, kind of using what Aisha said, I've actually encountered a couple drills where we weren't informed beforehand, and that was filled with like a lot of anxiety. For example, we had a fire drill one time and we didn't know that it was a drill. So by the time we returned to class, like probably half the school had already gone home just because they were scared there was an actual fire. So I think that like like advanced like warning, I think is definitely really, really important to making drills feel safe. But then I also think the inherent nature of the drill is also really important. I think that we live in a day and age now where we're all aware of the things that go on around us. And we know that at the end of the day, unfortunately, there is a lot of danger that happens in school. And so having these drills, having these plans is really helpful because I think we can't go into school with this mentality of like, this will never be me, like this will never happen to me, because unfortunately, it does happen to so many kids where they encounter dangerous situations. So I think just having that practice in itself really helps kids because then they don't have to go to school scared every day because they know that if something were to happen, they do have a plan.
Thank you, Ariella, for that. Again, great points. Gavin, your thoughts?
So once again, I'm gonna echo Ariel. I completely agree with that consistency in a sense and make sure you know what to do. But I think another thing that's crucial is that communication. So in my county, which has been very beneficial, we inform our parents at least a week beforehand of any drills that we'll be doing so they can inform their kids. And on the announcements of the day of the event, we inform them. And then and every drill that happens, they say, this is a drill, this is a drill, this is a drill, really loud on the intercoms. That way, there's multiple steps. For example, if students have special needs, they can accommodate with their parents and make sure that they have the proper tools. So that's not traumatizing for them. And then the other side, students are aware by them saying, this isn't a drill, this is a drill, or this is not a drill, this is not a drill. What the severity of the incident is, what we need to do. Do we actually need to lock ourselves in a room and get ready for the worst? Or is it more like, okay, we actually need to prepare. This is the time that we need to make sure so we can be safe in the case of the worst. So once again, that communication. And then following events, we also send letters home to parents saying how the drill went. So I think that's also crucial because when the parents, the teachers, and the students are all involved, you get that like full connection in a sense. And students have support from every single avenue, which means if, let's say, there was a negative experience, you can communicate that a lot more thoroughly. But also in the event that, let's just say, a student has special needs and needs to get accommodated further, that can be communicated. So making sure there's multiple access points for students and parents to have that connection to the knowledge of what's happening and just in general, pathway to communication is crucial to ensuring that future and current events are always up to date and best for the majority of the student body.
Great. Again, thank all three of you. Those were great answers. So I love that you bring sort of parents into the conversation, Gavin. So can either of you, the three of you, talk about like that parent role? Have you had conversations? Anyone had conversations with their parents about lockdown drills after it has happened?
So, yes, I would definitely say I communicate to both of my parents, especially after drills. For example, when I was in elementary school, although it wasn't a lockdown drill, our school had a fire drill, but so we thought. It was actually a real emergency, and it didn't turn out to be a drill, but an actual fire in the building. But because we had that quickness and we had that urgency in us and we were all prepared, we all got in our single file line and exited the building before the fire even reached any of the students or hurt us. So after that day, I talked to my parents and they made sure with me that I know definitely what to do in an emergency like that and if I feel comfortable and things like that. So I definitely think it's important to have kind of that open communication.
I completely agree with Aisha. I did a similar thing with my parents in those incidents, and we had a conversation. But also because of what, as I mentioned previously, the modified lockdowns, my mom specifically made sure to have the conversation of what to do in the actual incident. And to the point, we even I was in sixth grade during COVID. We were planning escape routes out of fear because we didn't know what was going to happen. So by the age of sixth grade, just when we came back at the end of, actually, no, seventh grade by then, just when we were coming back, I was told, okay, every single classroom find the quickest way to get out of the building because this lack of preparedness in our school system, at least mine personally, it doing only modified, has left a lot of distrust in the system as an entirety and leaves it to feel, oh, okay, students and parents have to fend for themselves and figure out their own plan, thinking teachers will just lock the door and that's it. So I was told, yeah, if it happens, you gotta find your own way out. So on the 3rd floor, I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna go out this way, this way, this way. I know exactly what to do." If I'm on the 2nd floor, I know how far it is. I know where I can jump. I was told to or even just run off this campus because just the lack of information in that regards and thoroughness has led to lack of trust.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of like piggyback off of what they both said. I think that parents being involved is really important. And as I mentioned, a couple times in my county, we actually didn't know that a drill was happening. And so I was there to like text my parents and let them know what was going on and letting them know that it wasn't like there was a chance that it wasn't a drill. But when my brother was in school, he's a little bit older than me, but he actually has autism. And so my mom had requested like special permission to know when drills were happening so that he would not be at school at that time just because the chaos would like trigger him and cause potential issues. So I think Gavin, I believe, mentioned about it's important for the accommodations to be there for kids with like special needs and any other things that might cause them like excess stress during this time. So I think that's something that's really important so that parents can ensure that their kids get what they need because at the end of the day, parents are kids' number one advocate.
Well, thank you for sharing that experience and I know I kind of threw that question to you spontaneously, but I appreciate you handling it. Another sort of spontaneous question I'm gonna um, throw your way is so Ariel, as you were thinking about, right, 4 times a year since kindergarten, all of you are 11th, 12th grade going to be moving into post-secondary options after you graduate. But also in the community, right? You all go to probably events in your community, whether those are extracurricular for your school or shopping someplace, right? Out to dinner. Have you ever like when you think about that muscle memory? So actually, I might Ariel ask you to kind of respond to this first. So you talk about the muscle memory of what to do, right? If there were some type of emergency where somebody's looking to do harm. Um, do you think the practice that you've done within the K-12 space allows you to be that much more prepared and able to respond in these other environments in the future?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I think that's a really great question. I live where I live in Hagerstown. We actually, unfortunately, have a really high crime rate in my community. So we've had shootings literally in my neighborhood. And I think that the school environment is a lot different because I think you're surrounded by so many kids and so many other adults. And I think in that sense, like being in that large, like compact environment does provide an extra layer of safety that you might not have at your own home or even in public where you might feel a little bit more isolated. But in terms of the practices like running to safety and things like that, I think that that muscle memory and knowing that that is my first instinct to get somewhere safe away from the danger I think does carry over from school to a public situation. So I would say that there's kind of like two sides to it. On one hand, yes, I do have the same muscle memory of, okay, I need to get somewhere safe. And I also need to make sure that I'm with my loved ones and I know that they're okay. And hopefully they're following me to somewhere safe. But at the same time, I think there is that missing layer of like, I'm not with hundreds of kids and even dozens of adults that I know are there to also try to keep me safe as well.
Yeah. So that independent decision making, right, becomes uh, much different. That dynamic rather than following others. I appreciate you thinking through that. Yeah. Anybody else? I mean, I know if that's something that you've thought about. What life looks like after you graduate high school, and how you take some of these skills with you.
I would say for me, it's crucial and it's common sense in a sense. Then it's common sense for me, but the problem is it's not common sense for everybody else. So while I know and I've learned and I know some of my friends would do this too, okay, get out of the school building, make sure you're not running and pushing all that. That's not going to be the real case in your life, sadly. And I feel like that is going to cause the most problems. So while it will help me, it's not gonna help the majority population. So let's say at my mall, actually, we had a shooting, the Columbia Mall, and in that, we people were running. That was all that happened. People were running and they were pushing, and it was chaos because people don't transfer these skills always. So while you know what to do, it's a lot of times other people that can cause the most fault, sadly.
Thanks, Gavin. Aisha, any thoughts before we close out?
Yes. So, kind of forwarding a little back about what Gavin said, I definitely think that it is definitely important to know about lockdown drills and even participating in them at school has made me have an urge to definitely communicate what I know. So, for example, at my local mall as well, PG Mall for short, we definitely had instances where police were there because of a shooting or a weapon. And we had people running, but also helicopters, police cars. And this is not just one instance, but multiple different instances where this happened. So, because of what lockdown drills has taught me in my school, I definitely feel kind of encouraged to spread the word, such as through flyers, papers, or maybe even starting a school safety club where we talk about this or at assemblies. Because if this is happening at my local malls, I could only imagine throughout Maryland and the fear that people may be feeling, but not knowing what to do.
That's great. I mean, all three of you are amazing leaders, and it's going to be exciting to see what happens and the future, what the future holds for you. So, any final thoughts? I appreciate your responses to all this, but any final items, thoughts that you have not previously been able to share that you want to throw out there?
I would definitely say to all students or maybe teachers that are listening to this podcast, it is up to you to make a change, up to you to be the difference, and up to you at the end of the day to determine your safety and others around you. So, not only take what we learn from this podcast, but what you learn throughout your life based off safety and protocol procedures, and be the one to be okay. I'm going to take action. Tell yourself that and create a change.
Echoed my opinions, and I entirely agree. And also, I think we need to focus on standing up for yourself, as Aisha said. So, creating spaces where you can be heard. I know students are always heard. So, making sure you take the initiative to say, okay, this is what's happening. I feel I need a space here and making that happen. And luckily, I know the Maryland Center for School Safety has done a great job of this through their student work group, but also at your local level, the power of students' voice and also getting your parents involved, being official stakeholders, you can get so much done. One call for your parent, and you get enough parents with them, the board will change so many decisions from personal experience because parents are the biggest driver of any initiative, at least at the education level, because they're the ones also who will further either vote to keep those board members in or not, or even the ones who will keep you in that school system.
I also 100% agree with that. I think that at the end of the day, the school community is meant to serve you as students. And so if there's something that you see that's wrong, it's up to us to bring attention to that because they're looking to serve us. And so if we don't share our opinions, they're not going to know what it is that we're looking to change. And at the end of the day, I think deriving from your personal experience is something that is super insightful. And the people who are a part of the school board and things like that, they're not students. They're not really getting that lived experience anymore that we are. And so I think we have to draw on that to really make a change in our community. And just because you're young, that doesn't mean that your voice is any less important. And I think that you shouldn't let your age or anything like that make you be quiet. And instead, you should feel confident to share your opinions.
Thank you guys again. I will tell you that we will probably call on you in the future to join us for other student voice panels, but you are amazing, and we thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for listening. The students in this episode represent countless other students with equally interesting insight. Invite students to share their perspective through methods such as a student-led school safety organization or a student advisory panel. The next episode in this series will feature a practitioner from the I Love You Guys Foundation sharing the importance of communication during lockdown drills.